Hello Laravel friends. Besides the auto-completion features, code generation is where Laravel Idea really shines. For our contact route here, we need a new controller, and there are a few ways Laravel Idea can help us to create one. First, inside our sidebar, if I go to my controllers directory, I can just open up the new window in PHP Storm, and here we now also have some options for Laravel. And here, for example, I can create a new controller. But even more handy is the code generation dialog, which we can open up through the Laravel menu here and code generation like this. Of course, there is also a shortcut we can use and you should use. So make sure to check it out, remember it, or define it for yourself, because you will need it quite often. I'll promise you. And here we can look now for specific files to generate. Of course, we will find our controller, but we will also find migration, middleware, or maybe a scope. So yeah, like everything you're going to need in your Laravel application, you can create it through this dialog. Of course, some of them can also be created through the Artisan console tool in Laravel. But first, this will take you much longer. Second, only a few code generations are being supported. And third, we have some really nice additional option which we can use, which I'm going to show you just in a moment. So back to our example, we are going to need a controller. And the controller is for our contact page, so let's call it contact controller. And I also want it to be a single controller. And here we are, you can see through the option single controller, we now have the invoke method. So this means in our route here, I don't have to define the method. I'm just going to pass in here the contact controller class. Back in our controller, of course, we now also need a view where we can show our contact form. And again, there are several ways in how to create this. We can do this through the sidebar, we can do this through the dialog tool, which we already have seen. So create a view, we can do this as well. But there is also now a third option. I'm going to call here the view helper and already tell what view I want to have. It's contact, we don't have auto-completion because it doesn't exist yet. But what I can do now is I can use the show context action in PHP Storm, and now in the dialog, I can create this new view. And here, fair enough, we now have a new view file called contact. And that's how we have created it, just by using the context dialog right inside our code. And to be honest, this has become a new default way to create a new view. Every time I need one, I'm going to write it out like here, and then I just create it right here from the code, which I think is just amazing that this is possible. Laravel Idea also supports a lot of famous packages in Laravel, for example, for Inertia or Laravel Livewire. So this means if I'm searching here for Livewire, you can see that I can create a new Livewire component. And this is currently only possible because Livewire is already installed in this application. If it wasn't, then we also wouldn't see these options here. And let's say now we need a new Livewire component for the contact form. So let's create one here as well. And we're going to call it contact form component. We could use it as an inline component, but we don't want to do this here. So let's create one. And here we have now a new Livewire component, which we then could use in our contact page. And again, Laravel Idea got us covered here with auto-completion for our new Livewire component. Since code generation is a very big topic in Laravel Idea, there are a few available options for us, which you can find under PHP Storm settings, then language and frameworks, and here we have Laravel Idea settings. And here first we have the general code generation option here, where we can define namespace or our user class name, and we have some more options like to choose to use single or double quotes, or even what we want to use for translation or translation key parameters. Also interesting, for all the different options we have to create a new code generated file, we have all those in here, and we can define things like the base class or the directory where we want to use them. And if we go through them, let's see, we also find some more options like, for example, namespace, a class, suffix, or we can make sure that we see this in the new menu, which we have seen in the sidebar. But mostly even more interesting to us are the file templates itself, which can be found under editor, File and Templates. And here we can find all the templates which we can use in Laravel Idea, like, for example, the one for the controller. And here you can change them to your needs if necessary. But sometimes it's also not enough using the given options from Laravel Idea for creating new Laravel files. And that's when custom generations come in very handy. So let's say in our application we're going to use Laravel Livewire a lot, and we want to make our lives a little bit easier by creating a new custom generation for creating a new test file for our Livewire component. So let's create a new one here, and we are calling it create Livewire component test. And the templates, so these are the given ones by Laravel Idea. And let's take here the feature test. Yeah, this one, because our test will be very similar to the feature test. And then we can define a base class or a namespace or a directory. And I'm going to set here the directory to tests, feature, and let's also create a new Livewire directory. And then we can also set a class suffix, and this one should be test, because I want all my test files to have the suffix test. And then what's pretty cool here is we can also create parameters. And I'm thinking about creating a parameter here so that we can define that we want to refresh the database. So that's an option. And the second option should be that we pass in the Livewire component, which is already given, and then we can use this inside our template for the new test. Let me show you what I mean. So the first parameter should be a checkbox to decide if we want to use the refresh database trait or not. And the template variable we're going to call refresh_database. And this should be optional. We don't want to make this mandatory. And the second parameter should now be a class which we want to provide. And we call it Livewire component class. So this is the Livewire component we want to test. And we also define here a specific variable which we can then use inside our template. All right, this looks good. Let's create this one. And now we also have to make sure that the template which we are using, which is the one from a feature test, also deals with our custom parameters. So let's get back to the templates by going to Editor, File Code Templates. And you might here already see that the feature test here is blue. That's because I have already adapted this to our new needs here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So inside here, this template here, I'm now referring to the refresh database, which was already before in the feature test. And if it is given, then we're going to use here the refresh database trait. And then here we're also checking now our new Livewire component class. And if it is given, then we're going to import two new classes here. And the first is the Livewire component class, which was provided. We're going to use this later. And then we also need the Livewire class to test our component. And then if we go down here, also interesting now is where we check again for our Livewire component. And if it is given, then we're using now our custom template here for our Livewire test. We already have auto-completion then for our component. And then if this is not given, we are setting in here the code for our feature test. Okay, let's apply this and let's check this now out in real. I'm open up my dialog window and searching for Livewire. And here I have my create Livewire component test. Let's call it now, we want this to be for our contact form. And this is not a suffix that we have defined, so we don't have to write test ourselves. We want to refresh the database and we want to provide now our contact component, which we already have created. And now we have here auto-completion to just easily get this class in here. And now with a little bit of luck, let's see here this new test class. We have here our imports which we need, and we are using the refresh database import. And then here we have already our first test, where we now also have already the class here to set up the Livewire test here. And then we can move on here and set specific fields or make some kind of assertion like you would do in your tests as well. And now how cool is that? We can just create now a new Livewire test, especially created for our needs, and we can just move on and write the tests that we need, and we're going to be so much faster now in our development. So make sure to use the code generation dialog to speed up your development, and when needed, customize the template to your needs, or even create a completely new one here under the File tab for your next custom generation. Laravel Idea is here to make your coding life easier.